Jim Farley.
Okay, we are on. We're here with Mike Farley and Sharon Farley from St. Louis area. This is October.
It's the 23rd of October in 2013, just so we have a place to go from.
And were you born in Corday?
I was born in Corpus, but lived here all my life.
Yeah.
You lived here
Up
until
until-
what age?
I was 25 when I left.
Okay. And you mind telling us what year that was?
Well, I was born in 41.
Okay, 41.
It was 66, I think. Was when I left.
Mid-60s, okay.
66.
That gives us an era of,
Sure.
Mhm.
of what we can expect that your memory
Yeah.
would be.
Mhm.
So,
Born in Corpus at the old doctor's hospital.
Yeah.
the house you lived in was Oaks and Mercer?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The
House still there, built in 33?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I love that house. Very good.
Yeah, there was a,
Yeah.
there's a painting of it that I made.
He painted this painting of it when he was
I was a
a
teenager.
teenager, what it used to look like. So you all might be interested in that.
Yeah, then we'll scan that.
Yeah.
Well, we'd love to be able to scan all this stuff because it's so interesting to be able to date things and then
Yeah.
pull up the same house or the same
Sure.
address or person and
Yeah, it had, the trees were a little bit bigger around the old salt cedar.
I don't think the garage was probably as close,
No, I thought,
yes, as it is, well, it's not as it is now.
Now, next door to you in the other Farley house,
it was Uncle Fred.
that was Uncle Fred's house. And it's an older house, is that correct? Much older?
Not older than that,
Oh, it's not? This one was their first?
This was actually, wasn't it, your grandpa's
no.
house?
No.
Papa.
Fred Farley Senior and Pop built that house together.
And I
So that
believe
one-
33 is what I've
Yeah,
always heard.
around that area. Uncle Fred's, I'm not sure, but I didn't think that it was older. I thought it was built afterwards, but it may be.
And your Uncle Fred lived where?
He lived next door, in the little house next door. Uncle Don's the one that lived down Mercer.
Okay,
He lived about a block away.
right next to the dryers.
Yeah. Well, no, that was, Grandma Mabel lived next door to the Dryers. He lived across the street from her.
Okay, which would be the old Cassidy, next to the Tracy's.
Yeah, I'm not sure who's in there now.
Okay,
In that
I
area.
can map that out and we'll put it in our,
Yeah.
I know what we're talking about.
It's another two-story house.
Yeah, old
Yeah,
house,
old house.
much older. Might have made the 1919 storm, I looked at those pictures, but.
Oh, yeah, it was there during those storms. Both of them were.
So your school, you went through all the red brick school till 8th grade, and then then you went to Rangers Pass.
Rangers Pass High School,
Graduated what year?
60.
60. They just had a 58 reunion. You would have enjoyed seeing some of these guys
Yeah.
over here, but.
Yeah, we missed that by a couple of days. We were in, I have one of the best friends I had on the island at the time, lives in Llanos, Texas. It's up on Lake Fork.
And who is that?
Jim Revelle.
Okay.
Raised.
Yeah, Ray Revelle's son,
And that would be who to Ronnie Revelle?
cousin.
Cousin. And Walter Revelle would be cousin. All right. Now, the boat operation itself, how much were you around the boat operation, boat building operation?
Spent a lot of time down there in the old shop.
And the old shop located,
It was almost due north of the house. On the
over
other
where
end.
Don Roy's house is?
Yeah,
that area?
well, Don Roy built in between eventually when Pop sold him the property. But where the two trailers are, right on the corner was where the shop.
that's where the shop.
Can you show us a picture of that shop north with the Johnny Roberts boat in it? Or the Lawrence Fletcher picture, either one of those is in front of that particular shop. Did you actually work on the boats?
Very little. I didn't have any skill to work on the boat themselves. I scraped bottoms and helped prepare for paint and stuff.
Oh, they had done into the board?
Yeah.
So they did a lot of repair and renovations also?
He did, yeah, quite a bit of stuff out
So
in the yard.
they would bring boats in and,
He would, other people would bring boats in there and work on them themselves.
I see.
In fact, he loaned a guy a drill one time. He drilled a hole in the bottom of his boat, and it was, unbeknownst to him, it was full of water and electrocuted him.
And that would be Burton Curry?
Now, is this,
No.
the one that's,
That's the right.
is that what it looked?
No,
outside?
Now, we,
Now, see, that's a pretty old photograph right there because of the wooden wheels on
Yeah.
the trailer.
that's 1937.
Yeah.
And you can see the Coast Guard, I imagine that
Yeah.
the tower over there from the Coast Guard.
That's our water tank.
Was that what it was,
Which
the
was
cistern?
Yes. Now,
And
that
this,
is-
probably this picture of the boat work itself.
Yeah, that's 1937, and that's Lawrence Fletcher.
Yeah. Was that right there at where the old shop was? Now, I'm not talking about, they had a shop down, like on the waterfront before. I never knew that one.
No, this is not that old.
Yeah. This looks like the shop I'm thinking about because
You probably need to qualify when Jim and your mom were married
Yeah.
in 40.
yeah, I was 5 when they
Seven,
got
yeah.
married. He was my stepfather and then he adopted me and my older brother.
So the guy that got electrocuted on the drill was not Burton, was it Gerald Curry?
No, I don't think it was either one of the Currys. I'm not sure who the guy was, but it wasn't a real, cause like, Burton and Gerald, Burton lived across the street and Gerald was a neighbor for a long time. Lived right in a little house there next door. The guy was an acquaintance of, like most people were of Pop. And I'm not sure, I just don't recall the name. I was there the day that happened, down at the shop.
Tell us what you saw, what you remember being at the shop, how many people working on the boats, how many boats would they be working on at a time?
Probably the vast majority of the time, Pop was working on boats, Jim. And a lot of times in the wintertime, Uncle Fred was there helping him. And a gentleman named Joe Dutra.
Okay, we know Joe. Now, when they start a boat, a Farley boat, when they started the construction of the Farley boat, I guess the first things you do is you lay out the ribs
On the shop floor.
on the shop floor. And when they start laying the ribs out, do they lay them out right side up or upside down? Mark, do you have a picture of this? Of the Farley boat without
Yeah.
the planking?
Well, I was talking about laying out the ribs. I'm talking about drawings on the
Yeah,
shop floor.
making the actual ribs on the floor.
Yeah, he
Okay.
actually made drawings. He had templates that he had
Okay.
made.
Yeah.
He could adjust them to whatever he was building, and he would then draw out the ribs. Once he got done drawing them out on there, most people couldn't tell what the heck they were. Because they overlapped each other a lot of times.
Because of every rib.
But
is
he knew
different.
exactly what he was
But
doing.
was he drawn with chalk or?
He used grease pencils and
Grease
pencils, just heavy duty pencils.
So
And
then,
he would lay the ribs out. This rib would have been laid out on that floor somewhere. And when he came in, he only did one side. The drawing was only on one side. And when he got that side done, he would duplicate the other side, so that he had the two parts of the rib.
okay, so he would manufacture each rib,
Mm-hmm.
and then where would he start next? Would he start with the keel?
Keel. Well, he would make a bow stem.
Okay,
And once he got the bow stem done, he would.
see your picture.
Yeah. Well, I was looking at it.
Oh,
Yeah.
He would do the keel part of it, tie the bow stem into it, and set that up. And then he would just start attaching ribs to it.
Now, as he was working on the ribs, that you're starting almost up at the gunnel and working down in this case,
Uh-huh.
the angles change.
Yeah.
So where each rib fits together is not the same as the one below it or the
No,
one
and
above
that's
it.
what he had the drawings.
So he would cut that out, but did he use the hand plane to get a better, perfect fit? Or he was able to,
He could, I don't know, presume you've seen the old bandsaw that he had, it's about 8 foot tall. I've many a time been on the dumb end of the board.
and on the outside of the building through that little
Yeah.
opening there,
Yeah.
okay?
And he would, like those planks, because every one of them planks had a taper to them. And he would sit there and line one of them boards up, might be 20 feet long, and start sawing that thing, you know, and follow that line without, he never wore glasses to see that with. He wore glasses to read once in a while, but, for the most part, he could see well enough that he could follow a line on the board.
So he'd set the, if
And he'd
there was,
set the-
if there was an angle, he set the table
Yeah,
at
he
the
set
angle that he wanted.
the table on the saw to the angle as it was coming down the side, and then he would cut the curvature to it and do it all by hand.
So when you would lay the keel, everything was in the upright position? The boat was
Yeah.
never
Yeah.
upside down and flipped over?
Yeah, no, they did it, like he would go so far down with that planking on that boat, and then they would bring it out, flip it over, and put it back in the shop
So they would flip it, but
Yeah.
not in the early stage, it was
But-
for planking purposes.
to finish it off.
It just made the job easier, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And then when they got done with that, they'd have to flip it back over so he could finish the decking.
Now, when you know, it's easy to say flip it over, but did he have an A-frame or some sort of frame and block and tackle
You're
or something?
familiar with Buster Noakes?
Yeah, I mean, I did the name and we have pictures, sure.
Buster Noakes had boom trucks, and that's what they would
Okay,
do.
that's what they
With
do.
the boom truck.
Okay.
Yeah,
Tell me about those long straight battens that are there.
that's the way he built all of
Just
it.
to support the ribs during construction?
No, they were the seams of the boards. The
Oh, I
planks,
see,
the planks met right at the center of those.
so you could fasten,
Yeah, and he notched those into the ribs so that everything came out smooth.
And
Marked
so-
the ribs of where the planks were gonna go and laid those in there.
Each one of those is in there, and that's like the center of
Can I
that board,
take
basically, is
pictures
the
of your
center of
slides?
And then they
Can I take a
nailed,
picture of your slide?
absolutely.
I'm sorry, did you say that again? About notching those battens in?
He notched them in and then fastened them, but what he would do is he'd put either screws or nails either side of where the seam was gonna be on the plank. It was some very precise work that didn't seem like it was very precise, because he had done it so long, you know, it just was automatic.
so, here you can see where it's cut in,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Then you
Yeah,
got-
every one of those was notched
Yeah,
in.
every one that was notched in, you can see the nail.
And you
in.
can see he put a nail in there, and then when he would come back and fasten them, he used, over a course of time, he used, several different kinds of fasteners. Very seldom screws, but most of the time nails. Sometimes he would, depending on what kind of material he had behind it, he would even drill pilot holes in it.
Would they use like a ring shank bronze nail or
Like-
did they have Monel in those?
They had Manel,
Had
yeah.
Monel?
He used a lot of Manel in it.
Okay. So that would be
Yeah.
what he would use.
And he would, like I say, he's got one nail in there, and then whenever he put the planking on here, he left space so that he could put nails in above it. So he didn't nail those in there like crazy, you know, until he came back with the planking and nailed
When he put those planks on,
them.
did he ever use a clench nail where you go through and bend it back?
Yeah, and that was where Uncle Fred worked with him a lot. He had to have somebody else to be on the inside for clinching, yeah,
Yeah.
Lucky. And the two of them, I've heard people say this, but I stood there and watched them do this. The two of them would never say a word to each other, but they would move in unison. And one would be bolstering and Papa usually always driving there.
Now you see he's got what we call a Yankee drill in his hand. I guess that's for pilot holes.
That's a screwdriver, probably.
Oh, you think it
He
is?
had those, he had screwdrivers that were the type you push.
Right, we
Yeah,
call it
yeah,
Yankee
yeah,
drill.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
Yankee
Yankee
screwdriver.
screwdriver, yeah.
Oh, he had electric drills that he used if he drilled holes.
Now,
But he put many a screw in a bolt with those, one of those things.
everything brass.
Manel, brass, depend. Anything that wouldn't rust, you never,
Now, on the hull itself, how long would it take them to make the hull, to get the hull ready?
I couldn't tell you a timeline.
Weeks?
Depending on the size of the boat, I seen him finish a boat completely in 3 months. So,
And did they do one boat at a time, or did they have them in
That's
series?
my question.
do it one at a time.
So from start to finish, and then they would
Very
start?
rarely, in fact, he'd had many a person, Paul Millsap, in fact, wanted to get him into a factory that built boats like
Assembly line.
the assembly line method, yeah, where you had several things going at one time and everything was being done in stages. He built boats to build a custom-built boat one at a time.
And every boat was for an individual,
Mhm.
so he never had a time to where he just built a boat and hoped to sell it?
No. No. He had enough backlog of orders, and pretty much his advertising was strictly word of mouth advertising. He didn't have any media.
Now,
Right.
we hear that generally it was a responsibility of the person that was having the boat built to provide the engine. Is that the way it was, or did he ever buy something from Gray or Chrysler?
90% of the time that I ever saw, the engines came from, he would buy them from like Marine Supply or whatever over in Corpus. And depending on if an individual had an engine they wanted to use, he would do it.
I think the early days, Mark, that
We're different from
Yeah.
the fifties and
they
sixties.
were basically using them out of a car in the early
Yeah.
days, with the transmission.
With the transmission, because they used all the gears in them. It was a good way to be able to keep speed on a boat you could set a throttle at a fairly low RPM and put it in a low gear and then troll all day.
But the later years, I think they get, more industrial with
Yeah,
like the Tina is.
Marine engines right
the,
there.
right. I
but
think
I've seen him get delivery on an engine in a crate.
So Buster Noakes was a key person involved with the boat building, setting the motors in and.
He was key in doing a lot of that kind of stuff, the hoisting and all of that, and moving the boats. He was very key.
Now, just so it's on film, does anybody know Buster Noakes' name?
As opposed to Buster, no.
Right,
As opposed to Buster Noakes.
Adolph George Jr.
I was gonna say, I think it was Adolph,
Adolph George Jr. That
Yeah.
took me forever to find that.
but it was Buster. I mean,
Yeah,
That's why they call him Buster.
if you called him anything but Buster,
right.
Now,
So-
you mentioned that they repaired boats, or
Yeah.
that people brought their boats there to be repaired.
Mhm.
Particularly after storms or.
Yeah, sometimes they get holes punched in them.
So they were doing that
Even believe it or not,
around while they're building a new boat. That's,
well, sometimes there would be boats sitting outside that needed repairs done to them. And sometimes he would get to points of building a boat that he may be waiting on something, waiting on supplies or whatever. And he would spend time out working on repair. Other times, you know, people needed a boat because they had to get back to work. You know, and a lot of the people that had his boats were his family and or distant relatives that lived here on the island. Like I say, most people were related over here.
They still are.
Yeah.
And
The trailers that it would be launched with, did he have a collection of them that?
No, Buster Noak did.
Buster Noakes did, so that was his business.
that was his department.
That was his, okay.
He was the lifting and transportation department for
That's
this.
mechanical
Yeah, and mechanical.
repairs and so forth.
Launch and retrieve.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah, he was a very good friend.
yeah, he was a good guy. So, in this picture, that is Jim, is that correct?
Yes,
And,
that is.
would you say, what age would you, we're trying to date the picture, do we have a date, Mark?
Oh, on this one, I don't think so.
If we wanted to take a shot at a date, how old would you think Jim was in this picture?
I'd be hard pressed to
40s?
know. It looked like about, but, somewhere in that area.
Okay.
Okay.
So how
Does it
then-
look like after you met him?
I was trying to think of,
Put that back on.
Well, back on the other one?
Yeah.
like your mom and dad, like their wedding picture, that kind of looked, and that was in the
Well, I was
40s.
5 when they got married.
Yeah, and that was,
Five,
Yeah,
so,
he was, I can't remember, his, I mean, his birth certificate, you can use his age, what was it, 30? He was born in
36,
19.
38, something like that.
so this looks like younger than when you remember him?
No, that's a whole lot of what he looked like.
Okay.
He looked very young, he looked,
You rarely saw him without a cigarette in his hand, and most of the time, if he didn't have that screwdriver, he'd have a Coke in his hand.
All right, now what about Joe Allister? Was he around a lot in your days, or was that early?
I knew him, yeah, I mean, he was around there,
Was he an employee?
at times.
Would you say he was,
He did a lot of cleanup and, you know, just keeping stuff out of the way, and
what about painting? Did he do a lot of painting?
sometimes he did, yeah.
He was listed as a painter in the census.
He did primer painting and that type of stuff. Pop and Uncle Fred were the two that finished painting
Everything painted with brushes in those days?
by hand.
Inside, out, everywhere, got a coat of paint, several coats.
And a lot of times that's where, like in the villages and on the interior of the boat, was where JoJo would come in and he would paint.
But where the surfaces you would see, they prefer to do it themselves.
The exterior, yes.
Yes.
I've never seen anybody could lay paint on like.
Now, did they buy white lead, linseed oil and make their own paint? That's pretty much what they did, or did they
Mixed it,
buy it
yeah.
pre-made?
There weren't a lot of wild colors on boats to start with, mostly white. Depending, like the Miss B, you can see there was a lot of varnish and stuff on there.
Do we know who that boat was built for?
Paul Millsap,
Miss B?
Miss B was his wife.
Okay.
And you noticed on the stern, it had Miss B on there?
Mhm.
Earl Hicks did that. He was the, guy that came over and put all the names on
So
it.
he was the sign painter or the letterer, he had the talent for that. TX numbers,
Yeah,
all that.
all the numbers and the names and everything he painted on. Oh, he lived right down the road from the shop.
Now, you know Abagine, yeah, we saw her just the other day, she's here, close. What else can you tell us in the boat building process? Inside, outside, times, I mean, where was the most of the time spent? Was it actually the hull, or was it the decking and
It was
cabin?
primarily building the hull, getting from that stage to a finished hull was very time. I mean, that was very meticulous to get all of that stuff put together and, you know,
Did they
used
use
to that point.
templates for the ribs, or was it a takeoff from,
On the
just
floor.
in a different place?
Well, if you had a view looking over on this side of this wall, opposite where he's facing, those templates were hanging on that wall.
Okay, so they would use those and scribe along.
He would use them, and he had them set up so he could adjust pitch them.
Okay.
Mark,
Do
where
you
they
have-
break.
Do you have the picture of the other framed out hull with no planking at all and setting outside?
Let's see here, let's go back.
Let's take a look at that.
Let's see it.
At Barney's house.
He used to use, in the old days, he used cypress to build boats with until he got to a point where he couldn't get cypress. And he switched over to Philippine mahogany.
And so the planks and everything were mahogany.
Yeah,
What did they frame them with in the early days?
I'm not absolutely, most of the bow stems
No,
I ever saw
Not
were made
that,
out,
not this one.
they were made out of spruce.
Really?
Was a picture of it without any planking, but it's outside the building.
Oh, you know who that is? That came from, might be easier.
Do you remember that 46-foot shrimp boat they built down by the harbor? They built
No,
kind of 2.5 of them.
that was before my time. That was Grandpa Fred's. What his forte was building shrimp boats.
Okay. So you have no memories of that at
No.
all?
Huh.
It wasn't far before your time,
No,
just maybe a little bit. And you don't remember the albatross, that's before your time.
yeah.
What boats do you remember? Sounds like you remember the,
He actually had to extend the length of the shop that day that you were looking at earlier. On the back side where the old saw was, he had to extend the shop 10 feet in order to get to build in this
See,
feet.
that's the picture that I have,
Yeah,
that I
Right.
brought.
yeah, that's Ray Ravel right there in that doorway.
now,
He actually worked with him once in a
now
while.
this boat we just saw is pretty much finished.
That model, back up, back
Okay,
up.
there's your Joe Dutra's.
That model right there, I got it home.
Do you really?
Yes.
Wow.
That was a model that he made for a pilot boat.
Now, this is, who made it?
My dad, Jim Farley.
Okay.
So that's not a Dutra model.
That's not a Dutra model?
No,
Okay, this is the Jim Farley model.
that's a Jim
Okay.
Farley model he made in about 1935 or something like that,
I think
for a
it's,
pilot boat.
I think it's actually dated, didn't he actually
I
write the
think
date?
it is, I'm not sure. But, well, I don't know, you don't have all of it there, but there's a notch in the back of this, from the keel up, it notches over. It actually set over a door, one of the wooden doorways that he had in the shop, the windows. You know, he'd just prop them open, and this thing set up over the top of that since I could.
I was down there, and I said, oh man, I like that.
Yeah, I've
He
got
goes,
that
"Here,
sitting on the shelf.
Here.
Did they build that boat?
No. He built the model, and they went in and they kicked it around, and they decided to go another direction with it, so he just kept the model.
And you have it still today, and you've had it since when?
I've had it since he died.
Now, when someone ordered a boat, did they expect to have, half down for the material, or how did paying for it work? 'Cause that's
You'd have to talk to Jim Farley. He kept all that in his
in
head.
his head.
Yeah.
Were there any books?
Nope. I do have, my oldest son has the desk that he used from the time he and my mother got married till basically he died. The little old desk, little wooden desk, he,
In fact, you called Philip, didn't you, just a couple months ago and asked Philip if he ended up with the books because,
he didn't keep books.
but he didn't keep books.